through our closing conversation. How is everyone doing? How's everyone doing? Great, good, very good, very good. So I'm very excited to lift the energy a little bit with the new Minister of Economy from Greece. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's fantastic. We have been all morning long talking about solutions, positivity. There's a lot of negativity, concern, challenge, change in the world today. You can wake up in the middle of the night and not go back to sleep if you like. But we want to talk about solutions, and I think that there are some really key examples we can pull out of the experience of Greece from the past several years. So I'd love to talk about that. But first, let's talk about you. You recently became Economy Minister of Greece, and one of the things that you talked about in that change was delivering tangible daily improvements to the economic well-being of Greeks. And would like just an open question. Let's talk a little bit about what you're aiming for. What are some of the goals that you're undertaking in your new role?
First of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here and to have the chance to discuss. And indeed, it's a very interesting period, perhaps too interesting at the beginning of my tenure at the Ministry of Finance. Having said that, for us yesterday, having the chance to speak at the IMF was quite symbolic, because 15 years ago, yesterday to the day, was the day when we signed our first bailout package with the IMF, and we entered the Greek financial crisis, which became a headline.
Happy anniversary.
It was a happy anniversary, characteristically, because 15 years later, we participated in a panel which the IMF named Success Stories, Pathways to Success. And this is a manifestation of the huge effort that was conducted domestically. The Greek financial crisis was quite significant, with significant human and economic cost. We lost 24 points of GDP in a lost decade, effectively, with 3 bailout packages necessitated, instead of 1, like in other countries. But now I would say that we're in the midst of a much different decade. We have been growing fast. We have a growth rate of 2.3%, which is much higher than the EU average. And a couple of days back, we announced a primary fiscal surplus of 4.8%. Only 6 countries in the EU have an overall surplus, a headline surplus. Our surplus is 1.3%. And, just looking at the performance of Greek bonds compared to other countries right now is a manifestation of this good pathway in our fiscal policy. So with regards to your question, what is to be done now, I would say fiscally we're doing very well. Our banking system is doing much better. But in a period with many unprecedented events and lots of uncertainty, which is the main problem, uncertainty is bad for the economy and bad for politics, I would say, overall, and for policy throughout the world, we need more reforms. We want to unleash our growth potential. And to use an analogy which I also used yesterday from my previous capacity as digital minister, overall, if we looked at Greece, from a helicopter view, I would say that we always had the hardware, but we lacked the software, the proper institutional design, the proper policies which would enable us to unleash our growth potential in many sectors, the obvious sectors, given the location. For those of you who have visited Greece, many of those sectors are obvious, especially vis-a-vis the food industry, the tourism industry, real estate. But there are some sectors where we have significant growth potential as well, which were not that obvious overall to the world. Education, for instance, is one such sector. We recently passed a law which allows for the establishment of private universities in Greece, which might sound odd to this audience. We were once one country amongst the very few, actually 2 in the world, which didn't allow for the foundation of private universities. We only had public universities. Solely such a policy unleashes, apart from the educational value of it, unleashes growth potential. There is a study which showcases that the added growth that we will have on our annual GDP will start at 0.6% and has the potential to reach 1.7% in 10 years. So those types of reforms where growth pockets are unleashed and red tape is eliminated at the same time, this mix of things, while being at the same time fiscally prudent, I say, is the recipe for further success.
So I want to dig into that a little bit and definitely come back to digitization and education and workforce as well. But I did not mean that ironically. Congratulations on that anniversary and on being recognized for the incredible improvements in the Greek economy over this time. Right now, you mentioned uncertainty. We are heading into what many analysts, economists, and government figures predict and agree will be an economic downturn. Greece has lived through this before, obviously. By the way, I want to add to your accolades, you were recently upgraded by S&P, your bonds, both long and short-term local and foreign currency, citing your unwavering fiscal discipline. So good marks. What are the lessons learned over this period from Greece? And you just started hinting at that right now, discipline, et cetera, that will take us all through the globe through this period of economic downturn, which is very likely to come.
Well, first of all, one thing that everyone needs to metabolize and I would say further understand is if you have negative headwinds, you need to have positive tailwinds. You need to start thinking about what you can do with your internal reforms and unleashing growth potential within each country in order to counter that effect. I mean, if we look at the European Union right now, what is the core debate of the European Union, apart from the whole discussion about tariffs and the negotiation that we're about to have or that we are having right now? Internally, we speak about removing barriers between member states of the European Union. Everyone is speaking about the Draghi report, everyone is speaking about the Letta report. What do those reports say for those who are not accustomed to the specific types of policies that they prescribe? We have barriers between member states in the EU which do not exist, for instance, between states in the United States. Those barriers are equivalent to having a tariff. They're equivalent to 110% in the services sectors. They're equivalent to 45% in manufacturing. So what do we need to do as Europeans? Remove those barriers. What should we be doing as member states of the EU internally? Remove our internal bureaucracy and our internal barriers. So this is one mindset change that needs to take place, I would say, in every country. The other mindset change has to do with fiscal prudence, because for us, after having experienced the lost decade, I would say that prudent fiscal policy is much more than a policy. It's a regime. It's ingrained in our, I would say, political DNA right now, because if you have experienced the loss of 24 points of GDP in the economy, the American financial crisis in 1929 was 25 points of GDP, 25, 26. So you can understand the magnitude of this 100 years later in a very different globalized environment. The magnitude and the scope of the impact was huge for every Greek. So we have fully understood the cost of that specific crisis, and we have fully understood which policies were wrong and which led to it. And this is what we should never repeat. As the quote says, those who don't remember the past are condemned to relive it. We don't plan to relive it.
Very good points. You speak very well. Also, I'd like to dig into austerity versus growth policies. So we actually had a panel here an hour or two ago with Open Society Foundations about the Jubilee year. And the Pope, may he rest in peace, spoke of debt forgiveness as a key element and construct of that. Yet we continue to push on countries and economies via the IMF and World Bank austerity and demand that. Greece did a dance with that. I'm just kind of curious your views on that and the ability to wend your way through that.
I don't believe it's a clear either or. I think that you should have a mix of things. I mean, as I mentioned, we had 3 bailout packages.
Yeah.
It's obvious that the specific policies prescribed, especially in the first bailout package, needed to evolve. We had the private sector involvement in our debt in the second package, so we should have started perhaps with a restructuring of our debt. But having said that, you need to have certain reforms which are difficult in order to be able to jumpstart your economy. We understand that. If you look at the new fiscal rules of the European Union right now, I think that they fully get it vis-a-vis how you should be doing what we call counter-cyclical policy. For instance, right now, Greece has a primary budget surplus and a headline surplus as well. What are the new EU rules of fiscal policy? That you can spend a specific amount of funds every year, regardless of your performance vis-a-vis the primary deficit. The rest you use for debt repayment, which is good. You save for difficult times, but you keep spending the same amount in a difficult year. Why? In order to have fiscal expansion, effectively, and work countercyclically. More or less, this is the spirit of what John Maynard Keynes wrote 100 years back. You are fiscally prudent in good times in order to be fiscally expansive in difficult times. More or less, the mix works better than anything else.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Let's come back to digitization. You brought that up. You were very focused on that when you were Minister of Digital Governance. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about the importance of that to Greece in driving investment and entrepreneurship nationally, and where you are in Greece's digital transformation.
Well, digital transformation overall is perceived to be perhaps the most popular reform that the government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis has done in the last 6 years, because it encompasses everything. It's part of our economic story as well, of our fiscal story as well. Because if you look at what was written on Greece in the decade of the financial crisis that we had, there was a big debate on tax evasion. There was a big debate on the informal economy. So we have managed to capture half of our lost VAT, value-added tax, which was the core element of tax evasion in Greece. This was done by a smart implementation of digital technologies in the economy, together, of course, with good policies, together with good and proper institutional design. The core policy was the development of a platform. The platform is called gov.gr. We integrated digital services there. We now have more than 2,000 services offered digitally through that platform. It's perceived to be one of the 2 biggest reforms in a recent poll in the history of our country. If I remember the polling, since we're at the court of public opinion,
yes.
as the room suggests, the establishment of our national health system has 89% positive ratings in Greece. The establishment of gov.gr has 88%. It's perceived to be the second most important reform, even though the platform is not really a reform, but it's a reform-ish in the history of our country, exactly because we changed the way our government, our state, interacts with citizens and corporations. And to give you a sense of measure, the European Union has an index. It's called the Digital Economy and Society Index. It maps our performance across digital interactions with citizens and corporations. We were last, or first to last, second to last, in 2019 when we started. In 4 years, we're above the EU average, in just 4 years. And once all the projects that we're currently implementing through the RRF, the post-COVID reconstruction funds of the EU, kick in, and they're fully implemented, full electronic patient records, full digital system in taxation, I guess we will be top 5 in the European Union. And in a country which was perceived to be the most bureaucratic country of the OECD, let me give you one example. Once we were starting this policy of digitization, what we were looking at was life events. From the birth of a child to the passing of a loved one, you have bureaucratic interactions with your government, with your state, with your federal government here, etc. How many steps each one of those events entails is a manifestation of how bureaucratic your country is. So once a child was born in Greece, you had 5 steps. The parents of the child needed to visit 5 different public services. Once you lose someone you love, the steps were 12, effectively making it more difficult to die in Greece rather than to get born in Greece. But interestingly enough, you needed to change the processes in both the books of law and the screens of code. And we did that for 2,000 services. Now the plan is to do it overall. We have mapped effectively how many services we overall offer. There are 5,500. I think we're the only country that has done this mapping through another platform. And we now plan to start eliminating them in order to further catalyze the economy, in order to further catalyze trust on behalf of citizens towards the state.
Minister, does this sound like government efficiency? Can I use that term?
Absolutely. Government efficiency is a positive terminology. It's a positive term. Government should think about being effective. But, terminologies, I would say, are the north in a compass. Every country should develop its own map, commensurate with its value system, commensurate with what we believe is more effective vis-a-vis attaining that goal.
I think they named the right guy, finance minister here, Greece. That's very good and a great way to think about that. I have one last question for you. We're almost out of time. Greece suffered a brain drain as part of 15 years ago, as part of the economic collapse. A brilliant entrepreneurial population. What have you done? How well have you done on repatriating and creating a brain gain, bringing that group, that cohort back to Greece? Or is that a problem? Are there new cohorts? And I'm wondering if you look at that and statistically.
It's very difficult to have a direct sense of numbers because within the European Union, it's difficult to measure it.
Yeah.
But overall, we have a sense. I'm going to repeat myself a little bit because I had the chance to mention this yesterday at the IMF panel. There was an article by Tom Friedman when we signed our first bailout, ending specifically with your question, saying that, no, Greece is now entering a crisis. I'm not going to be looking at the performance of Greek bonds. I'm going to be looking at what young Greeks do. If you see them leaving, start selling. If you see them staying or coming back, start buying. Well, they have started coming back. This was more acute during the COVID lockdowns. We saw many Greeks coming back and working via Zoom or Teams with their companies back to the United States or back to the United Kingdom or other European countries. More effectively, I think that the overall health of the economy, the overall health of Greek institutions, the way we have been performing in the last years is, I would say, the biggest boost vis-a-vis enabling them to come back. And I would add again and reiterate that our recent law with regards to private universities, together with our policies on public universities, because we have a very big academic diaspora, in every university in the United States, you have, I would say, characteristically many Greeks teaching or studying. This is also a manifestation of the chronic failures of our tertiary higher education system. We plan to reverse that. We have started reversing that. And in the coming years, I think that you will see many Greek academics starting to come back.
That's a fantastic way to conclude this discussion. As discussed, we started out talking about solutions and positive stories and what lessons we can learn. You've shared quite a few of those, from lessons learned from the downturn to how to digitize and do good government efficiency. Really insightful and very helpful. And thank you so much, Minister, for sharing your insights.
Thank you so much.
Minister of Finance, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll be down in a minute. So that draws to a conclusion our morning.